I'm almost to the church. This was the last text sent by Mary Johnson at 1:52 p.m. before never being seen or heard from again. Today, I'm talking about the story of Mary Davis Johnson, who disappeared on November 25th, 2020 from the Tulalip Tribal Reservation as she walked down Fire Trail Road. After looking into this story, it just left me with so many questions, and it left me really heartbroken for her family, who are still looking for answers. I can definitely see why so many people are talking about this case right now. The story of her disappearance involved a man who was walking down the road with her, a frantic voicemail, a house where she never arrived, and a husband who moved to California the day after he reported her missing. And yet, nearly a year later, the police still have no idea where Mary is or what happened to her. Her family has been working hard to bring attention to Mary's disappearance in the hopes that she doesn't end up another unsolved case of a murdered or missing Indigenous woman, like so many across this country. And while it's been frustrating, there may be cause for some hope with a recent announcement by the FBI. But before we get into any of that, let's start our story together today by looking at who is Mary Davis Johnson. Mary was born on August 31st, 1981. She was a member of the Tulalip tribe, and she lived on the Tulalip Reservation in northwestern Washington. She married her husband Eric on July 3rd, 2016. That's when she took the name Mary Johnson, though it seems that she still would go by her maiden name Mary Davis. That's why throughout this video, you'll hear me refer to her as Mary Johnson or Mary Davis Johnson. In an interview with CNN, Mary's older sister Nona and her younger sister Jerry said they were a family of 4 girls and that growing up, they were very close. They described Mary as having a warm personality, a beautiful smile, and an infectious laugh.
You know, she would snort when she would laugh. If something was really super funny, she would snort. It would make me laugh even more.
Mary was a very artistic person. On her Facebook profile, she described herself as someone who enjoyed doing native carvings, and she shared photos of drawings that she had done, some in hopes of getting as a tattoo one day. She also seemed to love animals, as she shared a number of videos and photos of her cats that she referred to as her babies. In a video done with the Tulalip tribe, Nona and Jerry share how, like so many people, Mary battled with addiction. This caused her to be estranged from some of her family members who didn't want this kind of behavior around their children. Now, as someone who struggled with addiction, I think it's important to note I don't bring this up to disparage Mary in any way. Despite the fact that she had an illness she was battling, she was still a warm and caring person who was loved by her family. I only bring this up because in a minute it will be relevant when we talk about Mary being reported missing. Mary was last seen on November 25th, 2020. On the day before that, November 24th, she was dropped off by her husband Eric at a friend's house on Fire Trail Road, which is on the northern edge of the Tulalip Reservation. We know at this time Mary and her husband were not getting along. It's unclear exactly why, but we know their marriage was coming to an end. And in the previous weeks, she had been couch surfing and staying with friends instead of at the house she had shared with her husband. Apparently, during this time with them splitting up, Eric was planning to move to California. And it's reported that Mary was concerned he was going to leave and take some of their shared belongings with him. So the friend she was staying with that night drove her to the Tulalip Tribal Court where she could get some legal advice about the situation. Police interviews revealed that while she went in and spoke with a security guard in the lobby, there were no attorneys available. So her and her friend left and went back to his house where Mary stayed that night. The next day, November 25th, was the day Mary disappeared. That afternoon, Mary was trying to get to a couple's house in Oso where she was planning to stay that night. Now, we don't know the exact location of the house on Fire Trail Road or the couple's house in Oso, Washington, but we know that the distance between those 2 points on a map is roughly 25 miles. So it was too far of a distance for Mary to have walked. The plan was to have the friend she was staying with give her a ride to a nearby church. There, she would meet a man who had offered to give her a ride the rest of the way to the couple's house. It's unclear exactly how this came to be, but when she was getting ready to leave her friend's house, there was another man there, and he wanted to ride with Mary and her friend to the nearby church. According to a search warrant filed in Snohomish County Superior Court, while Mary's friend was getting ready, her and the other man went out to his truck to wait. And it's unclear exactly what happened, but it's reported that they were waiting impatiently, and this made the friend mad. So he went out and yelled at the man and said, "Get out of my truck. I don't want to give you a ride." Unfortunately, both Mary and this man got out of the truck, and at 1:30 p.m., they started walking east from the house on Fire Trail Road, seemingly towards the church where Mary would meet her friend for that ride the rest of the way to Oso. When her friend arrived at the church, Mary wasn't there. And when he didn't see her, he started driving down Fire Trail Road, where he spotted her walking with this other man. Now, instead of stopping, he kept driving, but he did send her a text saying there wasn't room for both her and this other man in his truck because he had too much stuff in there with him. So at 1:52 p.m., Mary responded with a text that said, "I'm almost to the church." And according to her phone records, this was the last text sent from Mary's phone. Now, it's worth noting that later when the police got a hold of Mary's phone records, they discovered that she and this man had been in daily contact in the months leading up to her disappearance. But after receiving that text saying, "I'm almost to the church," he never saw or heard from her again. This is important because, as we're going to talk about in just a minute, this was one of the indicators used by law enforcement to support their belief that there was some sort of foul play involved in Mary's disappearance. But first, after Mary sent this text, what else do we know about her disappearance? We know that the police questioned the man that Mary had been walking down the road with. He claims that he stopped off at a friend's house along the way and that Mary continued walking down Fire Trail Road towards the church. He also reports that after that point, he never saw or heard from Mary again. We also know that there were 2 additional calls placed by Mary's phone around the time of her disappearance. First was a voicemail left for the couple whose house she was trying to get to in Oso, Washington. So while they didn't pick up, they later reported to police that in the voicemail Mary left, she sounded frantic as she asked her friend to pick up the phone. The second communication was just after 2:30 p.m. Police reports indicate this call was made to an unnamed woman, and while she picked up the call, she told Mary she was busy and immediately disconnected. We also know that while the couple reported to police that Mary never arrived at their house in Oso, police do think somebody gave her a ride that day. This is because about a half an hour after her last phone call was placed, so around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, her cell phone connected to a cell tower in the Oso area. The distance from where her last call was placed to that cell tower connection was about 25 miles, so it was too far for her to have walked. This piece of information is really important. I contacted Detective Sully, who has headed the investigation into Mary's disappearance. And when I asked him if there is one thing you could ask the public for help with, what would it be? His answer was, if someone gave Mary a ride to Oso that day, we would like to speak with that person. It sounds like finding out who gave her a ride that day could be a really important piece of the puzzle in finding out what happened to Mary. The only other information we have about the day Mary disappeared is that after connecting to that cell tower in the Oso area, her phone powered off for a period of time. And then later that night at 8:50 p.m., it connected to a cell tower in the greater Marysville area. It remained in that location through the night and into the next morning, where it eventually powered off, never to be turned back on again. So what do we know about the investigation into finding Mary or what happened to her? We know that on December 9th, nearly 2 weeks after she was last seen, Mary's estranged husband, Eric, reported her missing to the Tulalip Tribal Police. He told police that while he and Mary were splitting up, they usually talked about every 2 days. So not seeing or hearing from her in nearly 2 weeks was definitely a red flag. Now, the most frustrating words a loved one of a missing person can hear are, "It's not a crime in this country for an adult to go missing if they want to." We've all heard stories where a loved one of someone who's gone missing knows something is wrong, but law enforcement uses some version of that line to justify not taking action. So what caused police to take Mary's disappearance seriously? Because not talking to your estranged husband in nearly 2 weeks isn't going to make the cut. And remember, at this time, it was not unusual for her to not be in regular communications with her family. Well, Eric told police that Mary had not been by to pick up her tribal welfare check. It was still in the mailbox. This was really out of character for her. Usually she came by the day it was delivered to pick up and cash her check. This fact was used in the search warrant by the police to support their belief that there was some sort of foul play involved in Mary's disappearance. The detective wrote, "The fact that she has left many thousands of dollars in tribal welfare checks uncashed is a significant indicator that she is being held against her will or is deceased." Mary's case is just one of thousands of cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls throughout this country. This is an epidemic that's been going on for decades, and it's finally starting to get some of the attention it deserves as of late, especially after the Gabby Petito case. The attention garnered by this case sparked a national conversation about missing white woman syndrome and how little media attention is given to missing persons cases when it's a person of color. This is especially true for Native people whose cases rarely get attention by the media. In 2018, the Urban Indian Health Institute put out a report after studying the data on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in urban areas. They found that only 25% of the cases they looked at were covered at all by local, regional, or national media. And of all the cases covered, 83% of them involved a murder, which tells us that cases of missing Native women do not get media attention. And we know that media coverage helps solve these kind of cases. This is a big reason why I started this channel, to help amplify these stories that aren't getting covered in mainstream media and hopefully help their families find some answers. If this is something you're interested in, you can help by hitting the subscribe button and supporting the growth of this channel. And hit the bell to be notified when my next video comes out with another story of a missing person and a family looking for answers. Thanks for doing that. So it's not just the media that's the problem, it's also law enforcement. Police are less likely to take it seriously when a person of color goes missing. When we look at cases of missing Native women where law enforcement does take it seriously, there's often another layer of complexity, which is jurisdiction.
An Indian reservation, for all intents and purposes, is a sovereign nation. It is subject to completely different laws, governing bodies. They're like a country within a country.
Responsibility might fall with the county sheriff's department, officers from the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs, or the tribal police. Sometimes the FBI also steps in. There are both too many agencies jockeying for authority and not enough resources to go around.
This is true for Mary's case. She was reported missing to the Tulalip Tribal Police, where Detective Sully has headed the investigation into her disappearance. In an interview with CNN, he said, "Because authorities don't know for sure whether Johnson disappeared on or off the reservation, it's unclear whether they can leverage federal grand jury subpoena powers or not." So what do we know about what's been done to find Mary? At the time Detective Sully did the interview with CNN, he noted, in the nearly 10 months since being reported missing, there had been very little movement in the investigation, but he made sure to add that it was still open and active. He did go on to say that while the police department had established multiple persons of interest, because no body had been recovered, it has been difficult to establish the probable cause necessary to seek specific search warrants and further the investigation. So to date, no arrests have been made. Because Mary's disappearance was reported weeks after the fact, the police were not able to secure any surveillance footage or exact location data that could have offered valuable clues. In July, Mary's family worked with the Tulalip tribe to put up a billboard along I-5 asking for help in Mary's disappearance. In their interview with CNN, Nona and Jerry mentioned that there had been a search done by authorities and that they brought in some cadaver dogs, but the entire search lasted under an hour. Mary's sister Nona expressed frustration around the lack of search efforts for Mary.
I think, if she was reported as a white woman, she probably would have had more attention. And yes, it did take us a while to get our story heard and out there. I know it will take a lot of money, a lot of people, and a lot of everything, but she deserves that right, like any other white woman would.
So doing what they can, Mary's sisters have worked to continue to bring attention to Mary's case by doing interviews and utilizing social media. Recently, there has been cause for some hope. We know that now Mary's case is being investigated by the FBI's Seattle field office as well as the Tulalip Tribal Police. On September 15th, the FBI announced that they are now offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the identification, arrest, and conviction of whoever is responsible for her disappearance. And while this action was welcomed by the family, it's left many asking, what took so long? When I reached out to Detective Sully, I asked him if there had been any developments in Mary's case since the FBI made their announcement about the reward. He said he's glad it's helped bring attention to cases of missing and murdered Indigenous people, but in this specific investigation, it hasn't led to any developments. In fact, he mentioned it's resulted in a lot of people just calling him wanting to ask questions or speculate about the case, and it's taking his time away from investigating what actually happened to Mary. So I want to make sure to ask my viewers, please only call law enforcement if you have actual information you want to share with them about the case. If you just want to ask questions or speculate, do that in the comment section below. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. I know I have a ton of questions. So besides not bothering law enforcement, what can you do to help? At this time, Mary is still missing and her family is still searching for answers. When you watch interviews with them, you can tell they're so heartbroken and torn up by not knowing what's happened to their sister. You can help by sharing this video. The more people that see it and the more people that hear Mary's story, the more likely that somebody who knows something about what happened to Mary will come forward. Particularly someone who might have given her a ride or who knows who gave her a ride. Mary's body's not been found, so there's still a chance she's out there, and you can keep an eye out for her. Mary is 5'6", she's very slender at 115 pounds, she has black hair and brown eyes, and she has a sunburst tattoo on her upper right arm and a scar across the bridge of her nose. And finally, think back to November 25th, 2020. And if you know something, send in a tip. It might be something that seems small and insignificant to you, but it might be just the piece law enforcement needs to break this case wide open. So if you know anything, you can contact the Seattle FBI Field Office at 206-622-0460. And I'll put a link in the description below to where you can go online and submit an anonymous tip if you'd prefer to do it that way. If you'd like to see the full video by Tulalip TV where they talk with Mary's sisters about her disappearance, click here to check it out.